Welcome to Scripps Research, fully interactive resources for students and teachers or FIRST. My name is Rosie Alvaran-Seckler, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. If you're joining us for the first time, Scripps Research is one of the largest nonprofit private biomedical research institutes in the nation, and our mission is to develop the next generation of medicines and diagnostics to address the most pressing health concerns in the world, such as COVID-19. I want to encourage you to visit our website after the webinar, and if you have any questions after the webinar, please don't hesitate to contact us. We hope that you enjoy today's webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everybody of a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, all videos have been disabled and you have been muted. The format of today's presentation will consist of a 10 to 15 minute presentation by our speaker, followed by a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session that I will moderate. To place your questions, which you can do at any time, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to take the time now to hover on the bottom of your screen, there's a menu and there's a Q&A button. Again, feel free to type in your questions at any time. This is the only way that you have to interact with us since we're not using the chat feature. This is on the Zoom platform. If you are on Facebook Live, please use the comments box to write in your questions and they will be passed to me. We also want to interact with you, and we're going to be doing these via polls. So maybe this is a good opportunity right now to practice the polls. The first set of questions is to really get to know our audience, and this is going to inform our speaker today on how to answer the questions appropriately. So if you can take a moment to please let us know who you are and why you're here today. And I'll share this information with everybody. See everybody logging in their answers. Just giving a few moments. Great. So most of you are high school students, some of you are middle school students and college students. And you're here today to learn about bioinformatics, getting advice about pursuing science career, and questions and asking questions on this topic, and also listening to our speaker's story. So without further delay, I want to introduce our speaker today. She's Dr. Saba Hassan. She's a postdoctoral associate and bioinformatics lecturer in the laboratory of Andrew Su in the Department of Integrative Structural and Computational Biology. And the title of her presentation today is Understanding Bioinformatics. Thank you, Saba.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rosie, for this wonderful introduction, and thanks to Scripps Research for having me. Hopefully, there's a lot of interesting information that you gain from today's talk and lecture and discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about your interests too. So I'm just going to go through the basics of bioinformatics. And the first thing I want to do is go through a quick poll. So you just did an exercise of how to use a poll. I want to just ask, what is your familiarity with bioinformatics? So go ahead and take it some time to just say, you know, maybe you've never heard it before, so that would be none. Some familiarity, some exposure, familiar, maybe you've had some programming, I learned to code, some coding, and very familiar, you consider yourself an expert, which is very possible with the age of the internet. So go ahead and take some time. We have about 4 more people to respond, and then we'll close it. Okay, great. So it looks like most people haven't really had much exposure, or they haven't, or they have some familiarity. And so hopefully by the end of this, we're going to gauge and see that, you know, you feel a little bit more comfortable and that you're already interested in this topic is a lot. So hopefully we can get into these details throughout the rest of this discussion. Okay. Oh, what's this? Okay. So, you know, what is bioinformatics? What does it mean to do bioinformatics? The two main projects I would say that involve bioinformatics or kind of spearheaded bioinformatics as a field, and it's been happening before this too, are the human genome, which came out around 1999, 2000, and the gut microbiome, which came out around 2006. And so if people are familiar with the human genome or the gut microbiome, the genome, it's kind of the blueprint of our existence and a way of knowing. If you've heard of these different companies, 23andMe, and I have all sorts of opinions about those companies themselves, but these are companies that basically take some of your genetic information to then relay back to you information about yourself. And the gut microbiome, so there's all sorts of gut microbiome projects, and this is, we are familiar now with antibiotics and probiotics, and that the health of our microbial community within our stomach and our GI tract can contribute a lot to our own well-being overall. And so these are basically projects, or these types of initiatives, I would say, have involved a lot of bioinformatics. And so how did we actually discover the human genome and the gut microbiome? What was the process of this? And so we can think of bioinformatics as where biology and computers meet. And so here's a picture of me on the left. I am holding the animal that I worked on for my PhD work, and I collected that animal from the ocean. And then I took that to the final data from that animal. So I worked on microbial ecology of venoms. And I took that to my computer, and then I was able to output a lot of information from that initial sample into data that can then be analyzed and visualized and shared on the computer. So this is kind of it's a very interdisciplinary field. It's a very open field, collaborative field, and it's really at the forefront, I would say, of where a lot of science is going in biology. And so how does that actually work in real time? So you say you want to know what your genome is, your personal genome is. So you want to get a sample, in this case, whatever your environment of interest is. And so that's considered your field work. So, if you've done any of these activities or initiatives where maybe you've gone to the doctor and you want to get your genome sequenced, or you've done 23andMe, they request for a sample of your DNA, and that usually comes in the form of, they can get information from cells in your cheeks through saliva, or your hair, your skin. So that's kind of the field work of it. Then they take that sample, once they've collected, they make sure that the integrity of the sample is good, that it's collected in a clean way, and then they take it to the laboratory and they process that sample in the lab. So that's what the typical visuals you see of people, in a lab coat, and they're mixing chemicals together, and then they put those through machines. And the output of those machines then result in data. So if you're familiar with sequencing, I see there's maybe a comment in the chat here. Great. And so if you're familiar with sequencing, then you go on your computer, and this is kind of considered the dry lab work, where you're just looking at all the data that from the samples you collected and that have been processed, and then you're wanting to make sense of that and what that means in the context. So then you're actually taking that information and giving it back to, say, like you gave your samples for 23andMe, and you want to know, some information about your heritage. Then they take that data and they can analyze it, they can visualize it, and they share that back with you. So that's kind of an overarch of bioinformatics, and you can kind of do a mix of all of these to understand different angles of it, or you could just do the dry lab aspect, which many bioinformatics people do, and which I do now. I do not do any field or wet lab work since being at Scripps Research Institute, and I can talk more about that in our discussion as well. Okay. So then we want to share what we discover. We want to share this with other scientists and the public. And so I'm going to go ahead and share this example here. Let me just briefly do a new share. Okay. So this is a paper, and again, the link is in those slides, which you'll have access to. So this is a paper that I put out last year as kind of the first of many papers that are going to be coming out associated to my PhD work. So this is an open access paper that can be shared, and there's not a paywall to access this, which is a big push right now for many scientists to push for open access publications. Anyone can see this. It's been peer reviewed by other scientists, and it's essentially a first look at some of the microbial community from where I had sampled in Puerto Nuevo, Baja California, which is about an hour and a half away from where I am now, south. And you can just go through this and you can see all the methods. There's a lot of information. So usually these papers, they have an introduction, they have a method section of how we did the work, and then they have a results section of what we found and a discussion of what we think these results mean. And all of these images were made using programming and analyzed from data that I initially was able to get from samples, as I showed in that picture, in the wild. And so then let me stop sharing this for a second and do a new share. Back to the slides. So then once we share this information with scientific community and the public, one really critical aspect of doing bioinformatics is being able to reproduce these studies. So reproducibility and being able to understand how those findings were made is a really big aspect of bioinformatics for then being able to build upon that. And you see that a lot since the human genome and the gut microbiome came out, and there's been a lot of omics, as they're called, that have come out since then. And so this is, and I'll go over this tool a little bit in a bit too, this is the workflow of that paper. So if I go back here, share this. So the workflow of that paper, I don't know how many people might be familiar or not be familiar with GitHub, but here's the link for that is tied to that paper. And so basically, if you go through this, you can see exactly how I came up with these conclusions. And this is a really good way to then be more detailed with other people in bioinformatics or just other scientists in general, even the public, of how I went from that raw original data I got from the machine. So that's in this folder here. Clean that up to make it comparable and do a proper analysis on it. And then to get those images that I showed you before, such as this one here, where essentially what we're looking at are two communities, the bacterial and archaeal community and the eukaryotic community, and how they compare in the sediment and seawater in these different sites. And so this is essentially, this is kind of a snapshot of how bioinformatics works and a really important aspect of how we can then share this information with others. And I'll talk a little bit more about that further in the discussion. So that's one example of, basically going a step further with the samples we collect and the data we collect, and then sharing that and making sure that people can reproduce and build upon, and maybe even find new things with the data that we collected, but we didn't see that ourselves for not just, the next year, but hopefully 50, 100 years from now. Okay, so what are some of the common tools that we might use in bioinformatics? And this really depends. So you want to start at the data. So really, bioinformatics is very data heavy. And like I said, right now, I only work on a computer and I collect the information to then analyze in that computer from all sorts of different locations and sites and sources. And so one major source is the National Center for Biotechnology Information. This is a really well curated database that many scientists, not just bioinformaticists, but also wet lab scientists, biologists in the life sciences use frequently, and something that I personally have been using since I first started in research over, I guess, 12, 13 years ago now. And so that's a major site, but it really depends. It's specific to your discipline and the group that you're in. And so right now, I'm in Andrew Sue's group at the Scripps Research Institute, and I do a lot of work with Wikidata, which is essentially the Wikipedia version, the data version of Wikipedia. So kind of going a step further beyond just biology, it's a way to, our aim with contributing to Wikidata is to have, draw relationships between things that are maybe not as clearly connectable, such as, what a gene does or doesn't do, and how that might relate or not relate to a Wikipedia page on Lady Gaga, so basically going a step further beyond and trying to see connections that we might be restricting ourselves to by only focusing on biological information within certain databases, and also cross-pollinating between databases. So not just NCBI, but also databases like ClinVar, ClinGen, and so forth. So it really depends, but that's kind of where people start is, where are they getting their data from? Is it well curated? Because how well curated your data is from a database can really influence how well you're going to be able to analyze it and how much time you're going to be spending analyzing that data. The better curated it is, the easier it will be to compare and make analysis. And I would say about 90% of the time is just making sure that your data is sound and can be comparable and properly analyzed statistically as well. And then programming. So I actually started learning in R, and now I do Python and R. I mostly am going towards the Python end, so it really depends on the work you're doing. They're pretty comparable languages. It really depends on your discipline, what your group uses. But these are the main programming languages, and they're free, which makes it really easy to find answers anytime you're running into a problem. There's a lot of tutorials online, and these are the main languages that I would say people in bioinformatics use. And documentation and organization. So that's the GitHub page I was showing you before. This is, think of it as if you've ever, taken a class. I think everyone's probably taken a science class by now, in biology or chemistry or what have you. And you usually keep a lab notebook where you write notes either on physical paper or maybe a Google Doc. And think of GitHub and Jupyter Notebook. It's basically the code version of that. So now you're, instead of writing, a lab experiment that you did in the chemistry lab on a notebook, you are going to take the data version of that and the code you did of that and write that into your notebook as GitHub or Jupyter. So these are ways of kind of managing and keeping your information organized. So that way, when you look back on it a week from now, a month from now, 3 years from now, or somebody else looks at it, they can understand what happened and how it happened. And it's very clear and transparent for them reproducing and building upon and strengthening the quality of the work itself. And there are a lot of other tools that I can go into. If you have specific questions about them, I'm happy to answer them during the Q&A, but it really varies by group and it varies by the discipline. So if you're the thing about being in bioinformatics is you can really work with a wide range, and there's always new projects, there's new ideas. It's very exciting. And so it really depends on who you're working with in terms of what kind of tools you might be using. And there might be specific ones for that group or discipline. So why do bioinformatics? Okay, I don't know how many people might be familiar with Back to the Future, but it is definitely the present and future of biology. Even people who are, say you never want to touch a computer, which is what I thought. Back in 2007, I thought I wanted to be in the Amazon and the rainforest, saving frogs, saving poison dart frogs. And, that was my dream at the time, and this is my dream now. So things can change, and you can be happy at all times and enjoy what you're doing. And I still get to look at, poison dart frogs in the Amazon. But even if you're doing that kind of work, say that's what you want to do in biology, you will still need bioinformatics in some way, just because of the nature of how integrated bioinformatics is now with the work we do. Everyone collects data in science in some form. And the sooner you're able to learn how to do this kind of work yourself, the more straightforward you're going to be at being able to share what you found with other people and other scientists and the public. It's very interdisciplinary. So if you learn bioinformatics at any stage, it's very interdisciplinary and transferable. So like I said, I'll go into my path in a moment, and you'll kind of see just all the different things that I did until I got to this point now. And it's also transferable if tech industry is really big. Computers are here to stay. They've been here since the 80s and even before that, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. As you can tell that we're all on Zoom right now. So it's a great space to be in, and people are fairly welcoming and inclusive, which is also another nice feature of being in bioinformatics. And it's one of those positions that it's fairly good in terms of pay, and it's going to be around. And so what types of skills do you need and where to start? So I wanted to start with my path, and then I'll give a summary of kind of what you might want to think about going forward. So in 2007, I actually partook in a summer research high school program. I was going to work I was 17 at the time. I needed to get a summer job because I needed to take care of my own finances. And I was going to work at Nielsen's Frozen Custard. And then one of my friends had a brother in graduate school, and she said that I should apply to this program with her because she didn't want to be in it by herself. I didn't think I was going to get in it because I didn't think I was that smart. And then I did get in it. It was a paid position. It was I had a stipend for the whole summer that was the same as working at Nielsen's Frozen Custard. And so I did that in 2007, and it went really, really well. And so well that they offered to hire me after that. So that was my first exposure, and I was working in a wet lab at that time, making agar plates for bacteria culture. So that was very biology and ecology focused. And then I went to University of Utah. I went on to complete my studies there, and through a scholarship that I was fortunate to receive. And then I also was able to get paid as a full-time work to do jobs in various labs. And I was able to then complete at the same time studies in biology, chemistry, and environmental studies. So that kind of broadened my interest and trying to figure out what I liked. I worked in a combination of a total of 3 different labs in that time, one main lab the whole time, but just to, it's totally fine, you know, to kind of change your interests up and get exposure to different things. And then I went to the East Coast where I finished a master's in biochemistry, and I really wanted to get experience in fieldwork because I'd only done wet lab work, and I wanted to figure out, you know, where these samples were coming from and how to get a better understanding on the more ecology side of it. And all of these are paid. So I really encourage people to only seek and take opportunities where you will get paid, because you should get paid for this work. And there's a lot of opportunities out there, including for graduate studies, master's, or PhD. And so then I became interested in computers as I was collecting data for this last category here on my master's. And someone that I looked up to was actually very discouraging to me and told me that I didn't seem like someone that was interested in computers when I was starting to ask them for some advice. So of course, what I did then is, you know, maybe there was some other reason. I don't really know why they made that comment. I thought it was overall unnecessary and negative. But the point being is, you know, even if someone gives you discouraging advice, just try it anyway. And I went to graduate school. I was admitted. I was fortunate to get a fellowship for a PhD at UC Merced. And I started coding at that same time in 2015. And I was determined to start coding. The Merced being 2 hours away from the Bay Area, my alternative plan was, if it didn't work out, at least I would learn coding and I'd go into the tech industry in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. But I just liked what I was doing, so I just stayed. So I finished my degree there in quantitative and systems biology. And this was a combination of everything from field work, wet lab work, and data analysis. Probably 70% of it was data analysis and mostly bioinformatics. I don't know if I would recommend people doing all 3 at the same time. It was very stressful, but it was also, I did learn a lot, and it does kind of ground you in ways when you do end up more on the computer side of things, to give context to what you're seeing. And so this was focused on venom microbiomes. And if people have questions about that later, I can tell you more about that in the discussion. And then again, this was paid. I had health insurance, which was great. And it was very affordable for me as a graduate student to live there. So these are all things to consider in your career choices that maybe you might not think about in the longer term, but definitely makes a difference when you're at a place for 4 or 5 years. And then I started this position, which I'm really excited about. I love working here. I can honestly say I love working here now, being in May. And I started at the Andrew Stew's group. And I've been here since September. So I'm just going to share that. So here's where I am. And the website, again, is there for people as well to look at. And this is just some information, so people can go to this page. They can look at the larger SULab page, and also the larger outreach and education page at Scripps Research Institute. But just to give you some context of, you know, how to get to this path. Okay, going back to the slide. Okay, so it's a great place, and I've been loving my job ever since. So I am formally working as a postdoctoral scholar, which is kind of a training period after your PhD, and lecturer focused on applied bioinformatics here at the Scripps Research Institute. And it's a great place with great people, so very fortunate to be here and happy to be here. And then overall, what skills do you need going forward? So you want to start bioinformatics today, tomorrow, next week. The baseline is really an interest to learn. That's it. If you're curious about it, that can take you a long way. And if you have self-motivation, that's going to take you very far. And the internet is a really wonderful place. YouTube, there's so many things on YouTube now that, you know, me from 2007 wish was around for me when I was in high school or college. Twitter is also great. I started using Twitter actively midway through grad school, and I wish actually I would have started even sooner, just because there's so many conversations I've had with other scientists and even people that I've collaborated with now that I'm friends with that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And especially with bioinformatics, it's a really great way to keep track of updated tools and publications that sometimes take longer in the formal processes of a journal. GitHub is another way. GitHub is a platform that kind of goes between bioinformatics and tech, and so that's a nice way to kind of be in tune with both and learn a lot. Stack Overflow for troubleshooting a lot of questions, and there's even coding exercise apps. So if you just look on, what are the best apps for learning how to program or how to learn bioinformatics on your phone, you can do these little exercise every day, just like Duolingo or other little games, just to keep you practicing and make it fun. Statistics. I didn't take statistics. I took statistics in high school, and then I didn't take it again until 3 years ago. And I really wish I would have learned that sooner, just because statistics is a really fundamental aspect of being able to be good at bioinformatics and understand the fundamentals of why you might be wanting to do a certain analysis versus another. And it can really save you a lot of time if you know those fundamentals sooner rather than later. A lot of people that learn bioinformatics kind of learn it on their own. They're self-taught, it's ad hoc, and better figuring out what those fundamental structures are with the statistics of the data you're trying to understand, and also the code itself. I'm doing a cleaner code workshop, for example, tomorrow to kind of go through that. Will really help you kind of be a step ahead and being able to focus on the more interesting parts of what you're trying to answer and explore and explain the data that you have. A supportive mentor, 2 or 3. I think this is really critical. I would not be here if not for one of those 2 first mentors I made as a high school student, and just someone who is maybe in a job, even if it's not exactly the job you're interested in, just someone who is close to the kind of job you're interested in, and that's just available to talk. Maybe doing Zoom conversations once a month or every other week or whichever. Even on Twitter. Twitter is a great way to find very supportive mentors. There's a lot of good people you can find on there that will interact with you. And just kind of maintaining those anytime you reach an obstacle or a hurdle. They're really going to be people that you can look to for advice. And at the same time, in that same vein, finding a good environment to be in can go really far. There's a quote that I forget who it's by, but it says, if you tell a fish to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it's stupid. And so really finding an environment where people can identify and see your strengths and support and build upon your weaknesses. And that's really critical, being someone that's worked in a wide range of working environments, negative and positive. I would say the positive ones are always the ones where you end up finding yourself working much faster and much better and learning a lot more. And then the last one is just being able to pay it forward. So, once you start to learn things and you start to get ahead and, you're making advances, start to build that community. And, you don't know whenever you might need that community yourself. Bioinformatics, like I said, it's highly interdisciplinary. It's very open source. It's very interactive and engaging. And I think as a result of that kind of setup and structure, people generally are pretty friendly and pretty open to receiving feedback and having really open and honest conversations. And, be that person that you'd like to see, just as people are good to you, be good back to people and kind of complete that circle. And that also really helps with maintaining and growing upon your own interests and skill sets over time. And with that, I wanted to kind of open it up to questions. There is this Twitter post that I did ask people, and it went really well. A lot of people had a lot of comments that I wanted to share with everyone here, and that link is there as well. So this is a post that I wanted to ask. I just put out to the internet just to get an idea of, what kind of things to talk about today for the benefit of all of you. And there's a lot of information in here that you can look up more about later if you'd like, that I maybe didn't get to. But like I said, it's a good place to look and ask questions, and people that might already have an account can go and discuss further. And the last thing I wanted to kind of end on before we open up for more discussion is just kind of what you all thought about this. I kind of breezed through things pretty quickly, and I know it went a little bit over too, but hopefully it covered a lot of helpful stuff for you. And with that, there's one other poll I'd like to ask, and then we'll open up for questions. So now that we've gone through this presentation, what's your interest in bioinformatics now versus before the webinar?
Thank you so much, Saba, for that very informative and very informative presentation and a lot of good advice that you shared with our students today. And yes, if everybody can take this poll, and there might be another one coming after this, I'm not sure, but I just want to remind everybody to start typing in your questions. This is a good moment for that. It's great to see that all of you are more interested in bioinformatics than before. Okay, so I see, okay, there's another poll. Sorry. So if you can take just a second to answer these other questions, and I'll start reading the questions that are coming in. So do colleges have programs for bioinformatics?
Sorry, what's the question? The first part of the question?
If colleges have programs for bioinformatics. I guess that they were trying to say is that is there a major? Is bioinformatics a major?
Okay, yes. So, do colleges have? Okay, I see. Yeah. So there are definitely schools. UC San Diego, I think, is one of them. But there's definitely schools that have bioinformatics specific majors. You can do everything from majoring in biology and then emphasizing in computer science as a minor, to vice versa, where you do computer science as a let me look at the Q&A here. Looking at computer science as a major and doing biology as a minor. Feel free to definitely do your homework and, type in what are the best colleges to do bioinformatics. And then, you can definitely follow up with people after that and say, what's the environment like here? Is this a place where you learned a lot? And, reaching out to professors that are there and kind of get an idea of if it's a good fit for you. It's not just, where the best school is in terms of prestige, but also the fit and the environment, which again, I can definitely relate that as somebody, I originally had gone into UC Berkeley for college, and that I only applied there in University of Utah. I had a full scholarship at University of Utah, and so that's where I went because I didn't want to go in depth by $200,000. And then I did end up doing a summer research experience at Berkeley that following year after my freshman year. And I have to say, it was a really great experience to be there over that summer, but it really kind of solidified that I had made a good choice being at the University of Utah because I could really interact with people and get more in depth with the research I was doing. So even if a place might be prestigious in a certain major, specifically for bioinformatics, for example, it's more about the environment and the people. And I found a really good group of people at the University of Utah, and that worked really, really well for me. Same for UC Merced. And so I would say, trying to weigh that out with the curriculum as well, because that's what's going to result in you being a really strong, having a really strong skill set in the longer term.
Great, thank you. So moving on, a comment, great presentation, and thank you. And the question is, do I need to build up a strong computational background if I am coming from a more biological background? And also, maybe you can add, like, is it okay to move at any stage, or like should you start early preparing for this?
Yeah, the beautiful thing about bioinformatics is that you can just learn anything at any time. As someone who, like I said, I didn't even do any coding at all until 2015, and now I do bioinformatics as a living. And so, I think anytime you can, and because it is something that is very accessible with R and Python being online and open source, it makes it a lot easier to learn it on your own time. I think the best way to, let me go back to that question, to build a strong computational background is maybe finding an internship, finding a project where you can work with somebody on something you're interested in and explore it and see if it's really something you like or not. And then that will give you kind of hands-on practice. One thing I didn't talk about is that year in 2015, I did this internship with the Joint Genome Institute, and they were heavily involved in the human genome back in the day. And then I did an internship with them in 2015, and that really exposed me I took a nosedive into bioinformatics much faster because I was just surrounded by, there weren't any students besides other staff scientists there. So it was people that it's kind of a research institute analogous to Scripps Research Institute. And, they just treated me like a colleague. They didn't talk down to me. They really really great with me. And they just offered opportunities for me to try things that were really beyond my level, but they gave me that confidence to try it, and I stepped up to the plate. And so I think, just find people that are open to you trying projects with them as internships or otherwise as job opportunities, and see how it goes. And it's never too early to start something. And if there's things you need to learn in advance, they'll let you know, and you can build that up.
Great. So our next question, do you need to be good at math to do well in bioinformatics, because you mentioned statistics?
So it's a mixed bag. I think, you want to be open to learning math. So you don't need to be good at math today, but you need to be able to, just like, I'm maybe like when I first started, I wasn't good at coding in the first day. It takes time. And so I think starting from somewhere. So there's a lot of resources you can look at if you just type in, statistics and mathematics to learn for bioinformatics online. There's a lot of tutorials you can go through that can kind of give you the ins and outs. Maybe even starting with, how was a programming language made? And, I'm still learning a lot myself, like how do models work? There's so many different complexities to modeling. And like I said, like someone who's been doing this, I'm still pretty early in it, but 5 years and there's still a lot I don't know. And so you're always learning, and that's kind of the beauty of being in science generally, is that you're always growing, you're always learning, you're always improving. So I would say you don't need to be good at math necessarily, but you do want to have that interest to build and grow and improve. And that same note, it's totally fine to fail. There's a lot of instances where I've gone through an analysis and I've spent months on something. And then a year later, I look back, even, I shared this paper with you all. And honestly, I mean, I'm not super proud of that paper, but it's out there, it's published, it's peer reviewed. And I was a beginner when I put that out. And so, but the reason why I'm not super proud is because now I'm more advanced and I can look back and I say, oh, I need to improve on these things. But that's okay, because I was earlier in my career then, and I'm more developed now. And probably 3 years from now, I'm going to say, oh, I wish I did a better job on this, and it'll just keep happening. So that's good. That means that you're growing. And hopefully as you develop in bioinformatics, you'll continue to grow in your understanding of mathematics and statistics. But having that base of wanting to learn that from the beginning is really, really going to help you.
Very good advice. I hope some even PhD students hear to that advice that happens, with papers. So the next question, what is your favorite part of your current job in relation to bioinformatics? I think this is a really cool question.
Yeah, and so with the path that I showed everybody, I can just go back to that slide really quickly. Okay, the path that I showed everybody. So I present it as a nice story here, but the truth is I'm all over the place. I like so many different things. And probably one of the biggest critiques I've got throughout my life is that, you have too many interests and you need to focus more, which is true. I do struggle with that. I think if this is your problem, then bioinformatics is great for you, because you do have this common theme of needing to do analysis, but people will give you different projects. So like I said, I did venom microbiomes, and now I do stuff with Wikidata, which is mainly related to people's genetics and mutations in genes. And so that's very different from, collecting venomous snails in the water. And so, you can, and then there's another project I'm working on that's related to infectious diseases in the lungs of humans. And so there's so many different things that you can learn about. You're constantly meeting new people because you're involved in different projects that are related to those people. It's very collaborative. It's very interdisciplinary. And so I would say my favorite thing is really just being able to learn all the time. I love learning. I love asking questions. And it is definitely a space, I would say, where in relation to the other fields I've been part of over the years, I think is very welcoming and very open, because everyone is really good at something and also really dumb at something at the same time. And so, no question is off limits, and people have really great conversations, and everyone's very approachable that I've encountered for the most part. And so that, I think, is my favorite thing about being in this field. And it's just perpetually people are, because it's moving so fast, it can be stressful, but also everybody, it's much less hierarchical, I think, which I like. And everybody's always learning at the same, and interested in helping each other learn.
Great. So we have like 5 more minutes, and we have 2 questions here, so I think we can cover them. The first one is, how do I find mentors in bioinformatics? And I guess this will apply to any kind of mentors if you want to go into research.
Yes, so that's a great question. You can go ahead, one place to start. So I think this is where, and I mean, I think social media is as overwhelming and can be as much of a time sink as the next person, but when used correctly, it can be a very good tool. And I as someone who's like started as a non-believer, Twitter is a really great tool to find mentors. It's a place where there are a lot of scientists, especially people in bioinformatics on Twitter, and you can follow anybody and you can just, comment on their stuff, start a conversation. And for the most part, people are people. And so if you like things that somebody puts out, or if you appreciate the work they're putting out, you can just send them a message or comment to them and say, you might not know me, but I really like your stuff. Can I have a conversation? Can we have like a Zoom call for 20 minutes, 30 minutes? I feel like maybe I'm a little bit bolder than others in that approach, and I've definitely cold emailed people that I don't know at all, and I've sent messages to people I don't know at all. But I mean, what do you have to lose? The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. But the best thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a mentor, probably for life. And I'm very fortunate to have many mentors from many different disciplines. And that really helps especially when you're hitting those walls and you're trying to find stuff. So if you just you can start by typing in hashtag bioinformatics in Twitter and just see who pops up. In that tweet that I posted, there's a lot of people that are in bioinformatics that commented on things that they would like to know. And so, feel free to check those people out. There's Twitter lists that you can follow. So I would say that would be a good place to start. And then, just generally you can look for, professors that might be at the institution that you're at and start from there as well.
Great. And I think the last question, what does a day in your life look like? Is it just being stuck to a computer, or can you work on other things as well?
So this is a great question. So remember when I went back to that comment where originally I was thinking, I want to be a wildlife ecologist. I want to be a marine biologist as well. And so I was like, I'm going to be diving all the time. I'm going to be in the Amazon forest. It's going to be great. I'm very fortunate to say that thanks to my PhD studies, I was able to do a lot of traveling and exploring. I went to multiple countries. I went to Australia for a conference, which was one of the dream places I wanted to go in my life. And, a lot of those things I wouldn't be able to do or afford if not for these higher education experiences. So I did a lot of that work. I did do diving for my PhD. It was definitely rigorous, but it was also a lot of fun, but it was stressful. So imagine, when the quality of your work depends on the weather outside, it can be, a lot of things can go wrong. There's a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong. And so I would say now, so day to day, this is what I do now. I get up and I have certain tasks I need to get done. That's a combination of, just like management tasks and organization tasks, coding tasks, making educational materials such as these slides and presentation today. And I kind of break up those tasks throughout the day. And the nice thing of being work from home right now or having a computer is I can be anywhere. So right now I'm in San Diego, but hypothetically I could be, in Germany, and I could still be just as productive there as in San Diego. And San Diego's not a bad place to live either. So I would say the really nice thing about being in bioinformatics is you have your work, but you also can balance it with your life, which is also something I wanted to consider when I was thinking about maybe I want to have a family. And how I wanted to balance those hours. And I am fortunate to work in a group of people who are really understanding of that and have families themselves. And so these are all things I think to consider. And I think people are going in this direction, especially right now in our current status, of how to, so kind of going back to my day-to-day is I have these tasks that I do, all my work is in my computer. But the nice thing is, in contrast to before, where, I had to go in lab at a certain time. One time it was, it snowed 2 feet and all the roads were closed and my cells were going to die from a culture and I had to go in because they were going to die. So I had to make sure that they lived so my experiment could work. And that definitely happens to people. And I don't have to worry about that now. I just work on my data and I do that stuff for fun. I have a microscope. I still do microbiology for fun in my own hobby time. And I still keep up in papers and data in my own hobby time. And same with the field work I used to do. So I would have to go diving. And, if the weather was bad, I'd have to extend my stay or figure out more funds for my collecting my samples, or maybe I wouldn't be able to find anything at all. And now I can just go for fun, snorkeling, and I can, work with my friends that are still doing that work and help them and support them and just do the fun part of it. So it definitely, it's trade-off. So I think it really comes down to As someone who originally was like, I don't want to be at a computer screen all the time, that sounds terrible. Now it sounds really nice because I think it just works better for my personal schedule. And at the end of the day, figuring out, just try out different things and see what's best for your schedule. And things that I thought would be a lot of fun turned out to be more stressful than I realized. And things that I thought were really, really boring are more interesting. So, definitely don't limit yourself and see what works best for you. And I definitely like the flexibility of being able to do kind of what I want, when I want, more or less within certain milestones, and then being able to do whatever else I want in my own time.
That's great. I think that one of the best advice that you gave today is that change is good, that, you started somewhere and then you have tried different things and you're not afraid of trying new things. And maybe today you're doing mostly things in front of a computer, but maybe in the future you combine, again, wet lab with computers. So we're all evolving all the time. With that, I really want to thank you for the time that you gave today. I know that you're very busy. Tomorrow you're going to be teaching as well. So I'm very appreciative of your time today. And I think this was very informative. And also I want to remind everybody to follow Scripps Research Educational Outreach on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And right now you're going to see another poll. After this poll, this is basically to know how we did, and we appreciate if you can take it and let us know if you liked it. On Facebook Live, if you liked it, please give us a thumbs up. And then after we close the call, you're going to be redirected to another survey. If you can also take that one, and then at the end, there's going to be an opportunity for you to tell us about other topics that you like to hear. We're going to have more webinars coming up in the summer, and we hope that you can join us on those webinars as well. And at the very end, you're going to be redirected to our page where all the resources, these videos, previous videos are there, and you also can learn of the new webinars coming up, and you can register. So with that, Saba, I want to thank you again very much for your time today, and to everybody for joining, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.